Facial hair. For some reason, as a kid, I was not a fan. Growing up, a mustache equated to villainy. I mean, with dudes like this, could you blame me? I liked my heroes clean shaven, which is ironic since an abundance of facial hair usually meant an abundance of testosterone, making a mustache a universal symbol of manliness. So I guess it's no big surprise that in a cartoon that featured the most powerful man in the universe, a mustache was all but inevitable. Just kidding! I meant this guy. From the dawn of time, almost every hero had a sidekick, their number two, the one person they trust with their life. Batman had Robin, the Lone Ranger had Tonto, Ace had Gary, and Starzan had Chitae. No, seriously, these guys are real. They actually had a movie here in the Philippines, and so did He-Man. Anyway, it's just one of those things that stayed constant all the way through our favorite 80s cartoons. Didn't matter if you were an alien robot from Cybertron or a real American hero. Optimus Prime had Ironhide and Duke had Snake Eyes. Yeah, I said it. Come at me. Even if you happened to be the most powerful man in the universe, you needed a guy who always had your back with his, arms, I guess. Because unlike most trusty number twos, this one didn't just tag along for the ride, he literally built the ride. Along with every weapon, every vehicle, every gadget that kept He-Man's crew one step ahead of Skeletor's army of henchmen and hoverbots. It all traces back to one guy. This is the story of Eternia's original scavenging paladin turned chief engineer, resident daddy-o, and certified master of arms. And by that I mean weapons, not the appendage. Man-at-Arms. A dude who wasn't originally designed for Masters of the Universe at all. Way back before MOTU existed, Mattel designer Mark Taylor, the guy responsible for a huge chunk of Eternia's early visual DNA, was working on a completely different toy line called Rob N and the Space Hoods. Somewhere in his sketchbook for that line was a character named Paladin, who, despite being named after a traditionally brave, heroic champion who fights hard for a noble cause, was actually allied with an evil sheriff. But questionable allegiance aside, the design itself, heavily armored, face concealed by a helmet and a ventilator mask, red and orange color scheme, part knight, part sci-fi soldier, was awesome. And thankfully, Taylor clearly thought so too, because when Rob N got shelved, he didn't let the design go to waste. He recolored it green and orange, moved the ventilator down to the chest, and folded it into the new Lords of Power pitch under the working name Arms Man. A name that thankfully got reworked into Man-at-Arms, which, given his look, made a lot more sense anyway. A man-at-arms being a real historical term for a professional soldier from the medieval to Renaissance period, typically trained in multiple weapons and serving as heavily armored cavalry. Medieval soldier reference aside though, Taylor's true inspiration behind the OG Man-at-Arms look were the conquistadors, soldiers/explorers of the Spanish Empire who sailed off to the Americas and the Pacific during the Age of Discovery, not those golden jobbers from the WWF. And that inspiration showed up directly in the Silver Morion-inspired combat helmet that prominently stood out against the very orangey armor. Although, how much more awesome would it have been if he'd topped all of that with the wrestler's golden mask and cape? Just kidding. Speaking of capes, in the very first mini-comic package with the toys, Man-at-Arms is actually shown wearing one, a leftover trace of that original Paladin design. Now, conquistador armor aside, the other half of the character, the tech, came from somewhere else entirely. Piers Anthony's sci-fi novel Sauce the Rope, about a wanderer picking through the ruins of a fallen, more advanced civilization. Taylor took that premise and ran with it. Man-at-Arms wasn't just a soldier. He was a scavenger, digging up high-tech relics from Eternia's forgotten Great Wars and repurposing them against Skeletor, a 16th century explorer discovering 21st century circuitry in a prehistoric jungle. That one idea basically single-handedly pushed Masters of the Universe past the Conan ripoff label and into its own sword and laser lane. So with all that groundwork laid, Man-at-Arms made his plastic debut in the very first wave of MOTU figures in 1982. And for me, it was love at first sight. When I flipped over the card back of my very first Masters of the Universe toy and scanned the good guys, my eyes skipped straight past the oiled-up muscle guy in furry underwear and locked into the dude below him. Half his face covered by a metal grill, armor that looked like a tank. Was he a knight? A robot? I had no idea. But as far as the heroic warriors were concerned, he looked way cooler than He-Man, or that strange flying monkey guy, or even the snake girl. An opinion I'd revise, of course, once I hit puberty. All I knew was I had to have him. Of course, being a kid with a fixed allowance and no real access to toy stores, I never actually had my own Man-at-Arms. What I did manage was to convince a friend to share his, which really just meant that I kept it at my house until he forgot it existed. Look, it worked. Don't judge me. Speaking of which, it wouldn't be fair to judge Man-at-Arms' character based on his very first fictional appearance. In the mini-comics packed in with the figures, he was just a straight-up warrior, armed to the teeth, standing shoulder to shoulder with a wandering barbarian He-Man who, at this point, didn't even have a secret identity. This was the savage Eternia era. No royal family, no palace intrigue. Just two guys trying to keep an interdimensional demon out of a haunted castle. The original Man-at-Arms was described as a cold, calculating, and totally confident master of all weapons, in direct contrast to the hot-headed, short-fused He-Man of those early drafts. Man-at-Arms was the tactical planner, never went into a fight without exhaustive prep. Like Batman. It's worth noting, though, that even this early, two of Man-at-Arms' most defining traits were already introduced: his connection to the goddess, later the Sorceress of Grayskull, and his role as a daddy. In the second wave mini-comics, The Tale of Teela, Skeletor uses the mystic artifact Point Dread to drain part of the goddess's power and create a clone of her, intending to raise the clone as his own evil sorceress and eventually marry her, which is its own special kind of messed up. Fortunately, Man-at-Arms comes barging in like the Kool-Aid Man and rescues the goddess and the baby clone. And since the goddess can't raise the child herself, he adopts her and names her Teela, who grows up with zero idea of what she actually is: a clone. And before we leave the mini-comics, one more notable event happens much later on: the introduction of arguably his most significant creation, the heroic mechanical warrior, Reboot. It adds a whole new dimension to him as a father, a bit of a Geppetto and Pinocchio dynamic that later iterations of the franchise would explore in much greater depth. Then in 1983, Filmation's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe cartoon premiered and completely rewired who this character was. See, for the most part, the mini-comics depicted Man-at-Arms as a young warrior, closer to age to He-Man, and my guess is that producer Lou Scheimer found it a little odd to have him adventuring alongside Teela, who could double as the love interest of He-Man. I mean, she wasn't, but the potential was clearly there, while also being Man-at-Arms' daughter. I mean, it kinda would be like Ferris Bueller's best bud Cameron being the father of his girl Sloane. Actually, he kinda played that part, but you know what I mean. So Scheimer made the deliberate choice to age Man-at-Arms up considerably, to visually lock him into that more fatherly role. And what better way to age a man up than give him more facial hair? So Man-at-Arms got a mustache, specifically to make him read as older, wiser, and more fatherly than Prince Adam and Teela. And it worked so well it became the character's default look for the next 40 years. The show also gave him a real name, Duncan, which, if I'm being honest, never gave me any trusted advisor to the most powerful man of the universe vibes, but rather a dude whose crayons all quit on him, or made me crave for some choco butternut donuts. Design-wise, the cartoon simplified Man-at-Arms' look too. In the original toy, only his left arm and leg were armored, an asymmetrical design that honestly made him look kind of like a Roman gladiator. But asymmetry is a nightmare for limited animation, and studios like Filmation relied heavily on flipping cells to reuse art when a character needed to face the other direction. And so Man-at-Arms got armor on both sides, symmetrical, simplified, more practical, sure, but less cool. That being said, the softening wasn't just visual, it was emotional. Beyond still being Teela's adoptive father, Man-at-Arms became one of the only 3 people in all of Eternia who knew Adam and He-Man were the same guy, running constant interference at the palace and covering for Adam's convenient timing issues, and generally being the guy who kept the whole secret identity operation from collapsing. And speaking of secrets, in the special The Secret of the Sword, we learn Duncan is one of only a handful of people on Eternia who even remembered Adam's twin sister Adora existed, silently carrying the guilt of failing to stop the Horde from kidnapping her as an infant for nearly 2 decades. So, starting life as a scrapped concept for a space western toy line nobody ever heard of, to one of the most trusted friends of the most powerful man in the universe and keeper of his family's darkest secrets, that's quite the character trajectory, I'd say. That said, I'll be honest, I wasn't a big fan. I was a kid, and seeing my awesome armored up master of weapons guy basically turned into an old dude just didn't sit well with me. To be fair, aside from the aging up, all the tech inventor stuff stayed intact. But at the end of the day, like I said earlier, he just didn't seem that cool anymore. And seeing him in live action didn't exactly help. In 1987, the first, and I just have to say how nice it is to finally say first instead of only, live action Masters of the Universe movie hit theaters. And as part of He-Man's inner circle, Man-at-Arms, Duncan was pretty much a given, played by veteran TV actor John Cypher, best known at the time for Hill Street Blues, and who unfortunately just passed away this month at 94. Rest in peace. Production designer William Stout gave him a grittier, asymmetrical gray and blue armor set and a massive broadsword, while keeping the signature gray mustache as a nod to his age and battle experience. And while Cypher reportedly rewrote a scene himself to give Duncan more emotional weight, I don't know. With all due respect, I just wasn't impressed with how the character came across in the movie. I mean, if your only memory of the guy was of him hungrily chomping down on some stolen ribs behind a bush, that just can't be good. Fortunately, when the early 2000s rolled around, a brand new reboot of Masters of the Universe by Mike Young Productions finally gave Man-at-Arms his groove back. Don't get me wrong, he was still Duncan, the older, mustachioed, fatherly figure, but he just felt more contemporarily cool. Maybe it was the hip little ponytail at the back of his head, or maybe it was the hyper-stylized armor tracing back to the Four Horsemen's redesign of the toy line, or maybe it was his amped-up arsenal seemingly emerging from every part of his armor, capped off with an awesome arm cannon to complement his signature mace. Whatever it was, this truly felt like a master of arms. And while this was definitely a return to form for the character, 2 of the most interesting things about this version actually never happened, even though both were part of the original plan. The first was set right at the start. One of the most polarizing aspects of the new show was the complete redesign of He-Man's power sword, from that iconic, classic-looking blade into a very detailed, arguably tacky, techy look. And there's a good reason for that. The original pitch for the show was to open with an Eternia where Skeletor had already successfully captured the power sword. Duncan would have to step up and build a new one, empowered by the sorceress's magic, of course, so Adam could keep transforming into He-Man. That opening pitch got dropped, but the redesigned sword stuck around anyway. The second, more significant plot point was supposed to happen much later in the series, but never did because the show was abruptly cancelled first. In Season 2, the focus shifted to a new evil faction, the Snake Men, a primitive evil race from pre-Eternia. Despite being a formidable bunch of baddies on their own, the writers apparently felt they needed access to their own tech to even the odds against Eternia's finest. So in the episode Second Skin, King Hiss uses an ancient artifact called the Serpent's Ring to turn poor Duncan into Snake Man-at-Arms. Get it? In the actual aired episode, the transformation is temporary. Duncan reverts back to normal by the end. But according to later interviews with the show's writers, that wasn't the original plan. The intention was to make the transformation permanent, carrying into a planned but never produced third season, with Duncan becoming the Snake Men's new tech guy. But while that permanent transformation into Snake Man-at-Arms didn't happen in the cartoon, it did officially happen in the Masters of the Universe Classics toy line. We'll get to the actual figure later. But for now, it's worth mentioning that the bio on the back of the Snake Man-at-Arms card pretty much made canon, at least within the Classics continuity, what was originally planned for the cartoon. As Snake Man-at-Arms, Duncan is eventually forced into a duel with his own successor, Rhaenius, better known as Clampchamp, at the so-called Second Ultimate Battleground. He's mortally wounded. But before he dies, his adoptive daughter Tila, now the Sorceress of Grayskull herself, casts a spell that briefly restores his mind, letting him die as himself instead of as a monster. And speaking of restoring, if you'd like to restore my faith in the inherent kindness of humanity, why not do me a solid and help my channel grow? If you're enjoying this story, when you're done, why not watch another one? And another one? And another. Extended watch time is the best way to keep stories from Grayskull in the good graces of the almighty algorithm. So every view counts. That being said, any way you choose to help is greatly appreciated, so thank you. From there, it only gets more intense for later versions of Duncan. One particularly brutal treatment comes from the 15-issue DC Comics maxi series, He-Man: The Eternity War, written by Dan Abnett and released in 2015. The series opens on an Eternia already overrun by Hordak's horde, thanks largely to an orbital satellite weapon hovering in the atmosphere, raining death down on the forces of good. Think Death Star, but battier. Duncan volunteers for what he openly calls a near-suicide mission, hijacking a captured Horde teleporter to get himself and a modified Roboto into orbit to destroy the satellite. They succeed and the station goes boom, but not without cost. Having sustained heavy damage from the satellite security forces, Roboto is unable to get them both back to the surface safely, and instead allocates all his remaining power into shielding Duncan through re-entry. It's a bittersweet moment. Roboto, his own creation, his own son essentially, explains that due to his AI, built on Duncan's own mental engrams, he's incapable of not sacrificing himself for Duncan, because that's exactly what Duncan would have done for him. It has been an honor. Goodbye, Father. Man-at-Arms survives the crash, and Roboto doesn't. Duncan doesn't get a second to mourn his loss though, because he crash lands right into the waiting hands of Triclops. And what follows is a savage balls-to-the-walls showdown between the heroic master of weapons and the evil warrior who sees everything. Duncan actually wins it, ripping off Triclops' visor, rendering him effectively blind and knocking him out cold. But the victory is short-lived. Thinking the fight's over, Duncan gets distracted tinkering with the captured visor, giving Triclops just enough time to recover and turn the tables. Duncan is captured, wrapped up with a bow, and delivered as a gift. Originally meant for Hordak, but the Horde's leader had bigger fish to fry and just leaves an imprisoned man-at-arms to rot, which makes him the perfect tool for Skeletor, who corrupts him into a mind slave using the evil magic of the slime pit and sends him after Prince Adam himself. It's one of the darkest sequences ever built around this character. A brainwashed Duncan brutalizing the boy he raised as a soldier, delivering a bitter, self-aware monologue about spending his life building weapons in the name of peace and calling it hypocrisy. The twist, Duncan isn't the only one corrupted by dark magic here, as it's revealed that Adam himself has been poisoned by King Hiss. In the end, both men manage to fight off the evil inside them and rejoin the war against Hordak. And Duncan doesn't just help win the day, he gets proper payback on Triclops in the process. All that tinkering with Triclops' visor during their previous fight, that was Duncan planting a literal bomb inside it, turning his old rival into an unwitting walking Trojan horse. The bomb goes off later, killing Triclops inside Castle Grayskull, right where the villains had been holed up, and taking the magical barrier keeping the good guys out down with him. But Duncan doesn't get to walk away from this one either. After everything, the near-suicide mission, losing his son Roboto, being corrupted and weaponized into nearly killing another boy he raised, his story ends with a sacrifice that he willingly offers. With the sorceress's help, Duncan offers up his own life force so that his fallen daughter Tila may live, a trade that he had been prepared to make since the day she was born. Now, while not as dark and poignant, two later iterations of Man-at-Arms takes the character in unique directions too. Both told across two completely different series, both released on Netflix in 2021. The first, Kevin Smith's Revelation, starts off in a familiar place before immediately shooting off into unfamiliar territory, with the two big boys of the franchise, He-Man and Skeletor, essentially dying and taking a huge chunk of Eternia's magic down with them. Because he failed to keep Adam alive, and because of a secret revealed only upon He-Man's death, an outraged and devastated King Randor strips Duncan of his title and banishes him from the royal palace, on threat of execution if he ever shows his face again. Pretty harsh if you ask me, but when you keep that kind of secret from a grieving father for who knows how long, them's the rules, I guess. Years pass and Duncan essentially holes up in a simple cottage, living a quiet life with his adopted son, Roboto, until his daughter Tila comes a-calling, asking for help to restore magic to Eternia. Roboto joins the merry band, while Duncan takes a more passive but equally important role protecting the sorceress of Grayskull. In the end, the good guys win, He-Man returns, magic returns, and all is forgiven for Duncan, who officially returns to the king's good graces and rejoins the royal palace. Not as Man-at-Arms though, that title had already been passed on in his absence. So instead, in the follow-up series, Revolution, he takes on a brand new name, complete with an arguably even more badass new look, Man of War. And while Kevin Smith's series changed things up by removing the at-arms from Duncan's name, the next series did the opposite and quite literally removed the man. Netflix's CGI series set out to introduce Masters of the Universe to the next generation of kiddies, and I think it came up with a really great original take that works well for what it set out to do. In the show, Duncan is still a gifted and talented machinist, but he's about as far as you can get from the old, fatherly, mustachioed dude we've come to associate with Man-at-Arms. This version is a teenager, apprenticed to no other than Cronus, the guy we all know becomes Trapjaw, and in this continuity, also the disgraced former Man-at-Arms himself, already turned to the dark side. This take reframes the character not as the wise old inventor, but as the student who broke away from a corrupted master. His entire arc kicks off when he refuses to help Cronus and his partner in crime Evelyn, pre-Evelyn, burn down an innocent village. One good deed, and suddenly he's on the run with a lost prince, his friends, a magic sword, and a talking tiger. The big payoff comes with the show's major twist. Adam doesn't just use Grayskull's power to become He-Man, he shares it with his friends. And that's how Duncan becomes the master of technology, Man-at-Arms, in a reimagined suit giving off strong Samus from Metroid vibes, armed with energy shields, drone launchers, boot rockets, a Mjolnir-styled returning mace, and a speed build ability that lets him slam his weapon into the ground and instantly construct walls, structures, or gear out of raw materials. One of the best story beats of this version has him facing off against his own former master, smashing Cronus' jaw with his mace mid-fight, which is exactly the injury that gets him powered up by Skeletor's chaos magic into Trapjaw, Dark Master of Weaponry. And while there's no Roboto in this series, the show gives this Duncan not one, but two little Pinocchio-styled robot subplots. The first is Orc-O, salvaged and repaired, encoded with an old recording of the legendary wizard Orko the Great, and accidentally turned into a lovable, slightly unhinged sidekick who thinks that he is Orko reincarnated. The second is this show's version of Triclops, originally built by Cronus as a mind-controlling surveillance drone for Skeletor's side, ultimately damaged and abandoned, until the kind-hearted Duncan recovers and repairs him, repurposing him as one of the good guys. All in all, a refreshingly light but still respectful take on the traditional Man-at-Arms. Which brings us to the final notable version of Duncan, one that, depending on who you ask, some consider breaks the tradition of Man-at-Arms being a white dude. See, in the 2026 live-action Masters of the Universe movie, Duncan is played by actor Idris Elba. And yes, while it does seem like a break from what we usually come to expect, ultimately I don't think it matters, for two specific reasons. One, Elba is an excellent actor who doesn't just give instant gravitas to a character that I think every traditional Duncan needs, but an added personal swagger that I think every man-at-arms is much better off with. And second, and most importantly, he still has a mustache. Just kidding. Seriously though, once again, with the utmost respect to John Cypher, this is the true live-action man-at-arms that we were waiting for. Once again, all the basic and important elements are in place. He's one of the most respected, revered, and trusted members of Randor's royal court, a veteran of multiple battles and steward and trainer of the next generation of heroes, including a young Adam and his own daughter Tila. In his own words, he's the king's goddamn man-at-arms. And with all that in place though, he's more than just eye candy. In my opinion, Elba's Duncan is easily one of the best parts of the movie, with his own personal character arc starting with an awesome and riveting one-on-one showdown with a really menacing Trapjaw that he loses, setting him off on a downward spiral into a drunken mess, with his own creation Roboto, now a huge hulking woman. Yes, I know, how dare they? But I think it works, mopping up after him. Thanks to the return of He-Man, Duncan is inspired to not just rejoin the fight against Skeletor, but, in true Duncan fashion, gives off some core sage advice to an inexperienced and confused He-Man who has been told all his life to avoid violence and is now forced to fight Skeletor and his army. And what Duncan says is golden, as he asks, "What are you going to do when a guy charges towards your family with a sword?" To which he sternly answers, "You protect them. When the war breaks out, it's not the poets that step up. It's the man with the muscle. And he's not doing it for glory. He's doing it so that his children can see another morning." That is a man as far as I can tell. He stands up when he is needed, like you did. Perfection. If you ask me, one of the best things this movie did was properly address all those critics who accused the He-Man franchise of just being about old-fashioned toxic masculinity. And it couldn't have been delivered any more excellently than through the most respected daddy-o of the franchise, Duncan. A man defined by his willingness to do anything to protect and serve those he loves. And if that means jumping straight at a heavily armed flight craft to get to his own personal demon and jam an explosive down his throat, well then, so be it. Yup, this Duncan gets his revenge. Which brings us to what I see as the actual core theme, the identity of this character. Strip away the 40-plus years of mustache debate, and you're left with a guy who's played the exact same fundamental role in every single version of Eternia he's ever stood in. He's the human counterweight to a world built on magic and brute strength. He-Man has the power, Skeletor has sorcery, and Duncan has none of that. Just knowledge, preparation, and a garage full of things he's built himself. That's a different kind of heroism than the rest of the cast gets to have. It's not the kind that shows up and wins through sheer force. It's the kind that does the homework first. The kind that has a backup plan for the backup plan. A man-at-arms. A master of tools. A master of weapons. A master of knowing exactly what's needed to solve whatever's standing in front of him. That being said, that part alone isn't unique. We've all seen this exact flavor of competent, resourceful, gadget-slinging badasses 100 times over across pop culture. What actually sets Duncan apart isn't the skill set. It's the age, the experience, and more importantly, the willingness to hand every bit of it over to the people he loves. It's not knowledge hoarded for personal glory. It's knowledge passed down, a literal torch handed to the next generation, mistakes and all. As a kid, all I could see was my favorite, coolest looking action figure getting softened up with a mustache and turning into some old guy standing around giving safety tips. But now as an adult, and more importantly as a father myself, it hits differently. Today, I've got a much deeper appreciation for this character than I ever expected to have. He used to be Man-at-Arms to me because of the gear, the mace, the gadgets, the tech that took down bad guys. But now I see the name differently. He's Man-at-Arms because he's the one holding everybody else up. With his arms, with his experience, with everything he's got. The man behind the men. Yeah, corny, cliche, I know, but undeniably universal and undeniably essential. Essential like Man-at-Arms' presence in every decent Masters of the Universe collection. And so with that, let's talk toys. Fair warning, even after leaving out all those little dudes like Mega Constructs, Mini Masters, Loyal Subjects, and Funkos, it's still a lot. So if I happen to miss any, please let me know. 1982, the original vintage line. Green body, orange armor, asymmetrical left side plating, spring-loaded power punch, and his signature mace. Originally designed to function like a flail with the ball end detaching from the handle to swing on a string. That mechanism got cut before production, most likely over tooling costs and the fairly obvious child safety concerns. 2000, Commemorative Series, a limited vintage-styled reissue, reproducing the original 1982 look for collectors during the toy line's dead years between the vintage era and the 2002 reboot. Speaking of which, 2002, MYP Reboot line. Lovely, hyper-detailed four-horseman design, bulkier proportions, built-in arm cannon accessory, also notable for being the first Man-at-Arms figure ever produced with a mustache. And 2003 gave us 3 more variants of this dude. Battle Glove Man-at-Arms, Samurai Man-at-Arms, and Serpent Claw Man-at-Arms. 2009 Masters of Universe Classics, the first premium release of Man-at-Arms, featuring a vintage-accurate sculpt with a whole lot of new points of articulation. Since this was one of the very first releases in the line, Mattel didn't hold back. Swappable mustached head, extra weapons beyond the signature mace, including a short sword and a gun, all conveniently storable on his back, plus the 2002 styled power sword. A true master of weapons indeed. 2012 Snake Man-at-Arms, the controversial variant reworked after fan backlash to include new robotic limb pieces reflecting his 2002 inspired design. 2014 Battle Ram with Man-at-Arms, a third distinct classic Duncan, bundled with the fully scaled Battle Ram vehicle. A mashup figure combining a 2000X-style helmetless ponytail head with Filmation-style symmetrical double-arm armor. And just to make sure they covered all their bases, we got a separate arm cannon accessory included in a Great Unrest weapons pack in 2012. So yeah, any type of Man-at-Arms up to that point, vintage, Filmation, or 2000X could be achieved in the classic style. 2016, independent toy company Super 7 got Mattel's blessing to produce more MOTU goodness, starting with their Reaction line, retro-styled 3 3/4-inch figures kicking off Super 7's stewardship of the license. The standard Man-at-Arms, John Cypher's gray 1987 film look, and a glow-in-the-dark metallic green blind box variant. 2017, Super 7 Club Grayskull, a dedicated Filmation-accurate classic scale release, built to look exactly like how Duncan was in the cartoon rather than the vintage toy, the original mustachioed symmetrical armor-donning dude. 2018, Super 7 Vintage 5.5 inches, basically Super 7's take on a what if the OG line had kept going and eventually did Filmation-styled figures. 2019, Super 7 Crystal Man-at-Arms, a translucent variant tied directly to the Filmation episode The Dragon's Gift, where Duncan gets turned into a crystal statue by an ancient curse. 2020, back to Mattel with their brand new Origins line, the OG figures with modern articulation. Only this time, Man-at-Arms came standard with his mustache, reigniting the whole debate for a new generation. And on the other end of the spectrum, Mondo's 1/6 scale Man-at-Arms, the premium collector piece, over 30 points of articulation and a crazy accessory count. And of course, with all that came a premium price. 2 in 2021, the grizzled exiled mechanic take from the Revelation series, as well as the young Master of Technology Duncan from the CGI series. Another 3 in 2023, a Man-at-Arms Origins Serpent Claw variant, and 2 more for the Masterverse line, a deluxe version of the Revelations Man-at-Arms with even more accessories and soft goods for either his banished in hiding or back in action looks. And then, a new Eternia version, a modern reimagining of the vintage figure with swappable heads, hands, and helmets. Plus, a nice callback to the OG design with a mace featuring a detachable top held on by a chain. 3 more in 2024. MOTU Origins Turtles of Grayskull, Weapons Master in a half shell, with removable TMNT-inspired shell armor on the shoulder, arm, and knee, plus a tortoise shell mace and shield, released to mark TMNT's 40th anniversary. Quite the interesting crossover for those who cared. Definitely not the last one though, or the weirdest in my opinion. More on that later. MOTU Origins Cartoon Collection, a dedicated Filmation-style figure at Origins scale, packing a stasis ray accessory tied to the episode The Dragon Invasion. And perhaps the coolest of the bunch, Masters of the Universe Masterverse Man of War, the upgraded version of Duncan from the Revolution series. Another 2 in 2025. First, the Masterverse Vintage Collection, a back-to-basics, modern rendition of the original 1982 design, without the stash, of course. And then the second, even stranger crossover, Masters of the Universe Origins Bumblebee Armor Man-at-Arms, a Transformers crossover. Yeah, who saw that coming? And then we get to 2026, which brought a whole lot more Duncans than you could dunk a donut with. First up, MOTU Origins Sketchbook Series Paladin, a really cool release based on Mark Taylor's original never-produced Man-at-Arms concept for Rob N and the Space Hoods, before he was ever a hero or even called Man-at-Arms at all. MOTU Origins 2000X Cartoon Collection, an Origins-styled homage to the 2002 Reboot, not as detailed as the original, but with more articulation. That said, I think leaving out the arm cannon was criminal. MOTU 2026 movie Core line. As the name implies, this is meant to be the mass release toy line for the movie. Nothing spectacular, just the bare minimum for a decent plastic representation of Idris Elba on your shelf, released on its own or in a special Amazon exclusive 4-pack alongside He-Man, Skeletor, and Goatman. MOTU 2026 Movie Origins 5.5-inch scale. Another version of a plastic Idris Elba, this time with the more squat Origins proportions. But for the adults in the room, Masters of the Universe Chronicles, the premium 6.5-inch collector line tied to the film, carrying the Idris Elba likeness at a more detailed adult collector scale. And finally, a couple of not yet released Man-at-Arms figures worth mentioning. First, a premium version of the 2000X Man-at-Arms by, who else? Mondo. Faux fur elements, swappable portraits including a helmetless ponytail look, and a reptilian snake man head, an interchangeable classic mace and a 2000X style mace, and finally, an arm cannon. Everything a proper 2000X Duncan needs. And second, announced at SDCC this year, a new Origins Battle Armor Man-at-Arms, which I know kind of sounds redundant, as opposed to which version doesn't have armor. That said, real fans know that battle armor is actually a reference to the instant, spring-loaded battle damage feature from the original toy line. So yeah, a welcome addition to the bunch. And speaking of spring-loaded, okay, well, not loaded, are you familiar with the master whose head springs up at the first sign of danger on a really long neck? If you want to know more about the heroic human periscope Mechanic, I've got his story here. Or if you want my latest story, I've got that over here. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope to hear from you in the comments below. Go ahead and tell me your story.